All right, it's about 10 minutes to the hour of 8 a.m. this very first day of June 2023. It's a new month, like I said at the beginning of the program, new things, new beginnings, new abilities to be able to push forward in perfecting the hustle. This is Morning at NTV, and if you're just joining us, you find us at the Kickstarter segment of the show. Political and economic dynamics of the anti-homosexuality legislation. There is a lot that is going on. So much is being said, criticism, reaction, opinion, and the way forward. Every player from their point of view is speaking. Will the Constitutional Court, will the powers that be listen to every party so that there is harmony and fairness when it comes to the how and the when the law shall roll out? I'll be introducing my guests a little bit later, but a preamble is necessary. Let's now hear the MP for Bireete Municipality, Asuman Basalirwa, speaking in the aftermath of the assent to the piece of legislation by the President.
Petitioned the Constitutional Court just hours after confirmation that President Yoweri Museveni had assented to the anti-homosexuality law. Their challenge against the Attorney General is premised on matters of procedure like the failure to provide adequate time for public participation and on its clauses such as the one on the criminalization of publication.
Not even a single LGBT person was basically before the committee to have their views heard, and this is a law that affects them directly.
Even before the proceedings commence, the petitioners have suffered the first setback after two of the people mentioned in the petition disassociated themselves from the legal action. MP for West Budama Northeast Fox Odoi Oyuelo and one Dr. Frank Mugisha have asked to be removed from the petition.
If you do it without authorization, it is against the Advocates Act, it is against our ethics, and it is a matter that can attract sanctions from the law council.
Basalirwa intends to offer defense against the petition, despite it being brought against the legal representative of government, the Attorney General.
And join as amicus curiae, friends of court, the rules of procedure allow anybody with information that can facilitate the determination of a matter before court to apply. And some of us intend to apply to be in that case.
Some MPs have expressed misgivings about the involvement of the Attorney General's office, especially since the Deputy Attorney General Jackson Kafuzi was perceived to have advised the President not to assent to the law.
I initially wanted to lynch Kafuzi, but the person to lynch is the one who is here, the Honorable Chiriowa.
My role is to advise the President.
You cannot report this House and say, we made a mistake, we forced you, and from today onwards, you will not come to this House and defend any bill.
Basalirwa also indicated that the petition may have been filed outside the requirement of the law since it had not been gazetted at the time of the filing.
In law, in effect, there is no case filed. So they have to wait until the suit, the act has been gazetted. Then they proceed to file their case.
The law Parliament passed at the beginning of May provides for a maximum sentence of death penalty upon conviction for aggravated homosexuality and a life sentence for homosexuality. It has been dubbed retrogressive by the West, and some donor partners have indicated that passing the law could disrupt the progress made in the fight against HIV/AIDS. Jackson Onyango, NTV at Parliament.
Jackson Onyango for that report as NTV covered 8. Now, let me just continue with the preamble to our discussion. Scholarship of the legal regime governing non-heteronormative sexualities in Uganda narrowly focuses on interpreting the law and its implications on social, political and economic health of a country. Less analytical attention is focused on diverse appropriations of power and the powerlessness of varied actors within the international context. Uganda's recently signed Anti-Homosexuality Act is being challenged in court before it's even gazetted. The implications are enormous, especially in the context of foreign aid having been shaken up by statements from the United States and the World Bank. There's a lot that we can chew on. To build on this analysis, I have with me this morning Sarah Bireete, the Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance. We'll be joined a little bit later by human rights activist Rogers Kirenga for his perspective too, so that we can get to terms with understanding the dynamics at play. Let me begin by asking the versatile and indefatigable Sarah Bireete. The Anti-Homosexuality Act is not a new phenomenon in the country. If I can recall, this political soap opera has played out before, where we had a law passed by Parliament, assented to by the President, and then there was a reaction from the international community. A petition was filed in court, and it was repealed. Yes. We are now back at this stage. I see, or rather feel, a sense of deja vu. Do you?
Well, there has been a lot of emotional display during the enactment of the Anti-Homosexuality Act. Many people riding onto cultural values, you know, our need for existence as a people, like the President has put it. So we have had all that. And in any democracy, the majority should have their say, their way, while the minority should have their say.
Okay.
We had that in Parliament, although at some point I thought Parliament was really harassing the two minority MPs. In the first phase of the passing of the law, everybody went personal against Honorable Fox-Odoi, which was very unprofessional. Because majority should have their way, but minority must have their say. So in the second phase, when the President returned the bill, there were two MPs, and they have also both gone to court. There are two election petitions in court, one led by Dr. Adrian Juko and another led by Honorable Fox-Odoi, where the two MPs are petitioners. So we have now ended the phase of noise, and we have the law has now entered the phase of logic and common sense. We are also faced with political, economic, as well as constitutional questions on the law. The constitution, the constitutional petitions raise a range of varied issues that need interpretation. One is the supremacy of the Constitution under Article 2, which says that any law, custom, or value that is inconsistent with the Constitution is null and void to the extent of the inconsistency. And the petitioners are asking court to check whether if you enact a law that has aspects like institutional discrimination, employers should not allow, you know, like people who are gay to be employed. First of all, how do you even establish whether somebody is gay or not? How? You are an employer, somebody qualifies, you interview them, you do your background checks, you give them a job. Are we supposed now to do sexual orientation background checks? How do you do them? That's part of the question that the World Bank is raising. Are
you straight or gay? And then you state.
But that's institutionalized discrimination. And Article 21 of the Constitution says all persons, regardless of race, sex, gender, and that's one of the checks before the Constitution. So is the law in conformity with the standards we set for ourselves as a nation? And I think it's a very good step, because many people are alleging this is a donor agenda, this is a donor issue, okay. But the law is not being checked against the American Constitution. It's being checked against the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda, which is the supreme law of the land. When you go to Article 89 of the Constitution, Clause 2 states that a presiding office of Parliament should not have an original or casting vote. What does that mean? Before the law was introduced, the Speaker of Parliament shared a view, saying we are going to introduce this law. We are going to enact it. The video went viral in the morning, and in the afternoon, a private member was granted leave to introduce the law. So who was the mover of that law? Was it the Speaker? Was it Basarira? And did the Speaker violate Article 89(2), which says a presiding office of Parliament should not have an original or casting vote, meaning that even if you have a view on a law, that view should never be public, should never be known by the public. And her conduct, where petitioners impute bias. These are serious constitutional matters that should be interrogated.
Matters. Of course, there is a spanner that has been thrown into the works of the petition. The two apparent petitioners have told the lawyers that they are not part of the petition and their names should be withdrawn. That does not change the...
Let me say something brief on that. I saw the note for the lawyers.
Yeah.
Because it went viral. But the Honorable Fox Odoi was simply saying, I am preparing my own petition. I'm not part of this. And they have already filed. So there are two petitions. One led by Dr. Adrian Juko, another one led by Honorable Fox Odoi. And they raise a range of different constitutional issues. The key issues raised by the petition by Fox Odoi is that the Constitutional Court, in 3 previous constitutional petitions, have ruled a tendency to discriminate against homosexuality in this country as unconstitutional. The first petition was against the closure of Rolling Stone, the tabloid that came purportedly promoting homosexuality. The Constitution Court says the laws that the government had used then to close the Rolling Stone were unconstitutional. And so many other petitions by Jacqueline, another one by Professor Joe Nyangoloka, the last one. So how different is it? And Article 92 of the Constitution, maybe as I conclude now, Article 92 of the Constitution says Parliament should not legislate against a decision of court. The retrospective element. So you have 3 Constitutional Court judgments, and you are seeking to legislate against them. So are you legislating in a retrospective manner to defeat the decisions of court or not?
Very shortly, I'll be coming to Rogers Kirenga, a human rights activist, so that Robert Kirenga, my apologies for that, a human rights activist. But just allow me make sure this point is effectively driven home. You say there are 3 aspects of the law that we need to glide over.
Yes.
And the Parliament, as we see it, with a principal or presiding officer who, well, might have a little bit of trouble getting to terms with her own mandate, according to you. Where do we go forward on that?
No, good enough we have a Constitutional Court, which is vested with powers to interpret the acts of the legislators.
We wait for the Constitutional Court. Robert Kirenga, I would love to ask you all the questions, perhaps, but let me just have your take. Sarah Bireete has talked about the fact that the noise is now behind us. We are now at a point where we are discussing the constitutionality of this piece of legislation and how it plays into or is in line with the Constitution. So in other words, the battle lines are off orientation, the social dynamics, to simply constitutionality. And that's the question that must be addressed first before we go to aspects like it is non-Africa, whoever think, the moral aspects of it. Where are we right now, in your view?
I tend to agree with my sister Sarah that courts will really have to tell us whether this piece of legislation is constitutional or unconstitutional. The issue of whether there are, as you indicated earlier, morals is now behind our backs. And we are going to wait how the lawyers are going to argue their case to show that this act or this piece of legislation, it contravenes many provisions of the Constitution, especially those related to discrimination. and those related to the right to privacy. So my view is that really we're going to wait to see how the land judges are going to handle this matter, but there are also precedents. And she has indicated.
Yeah, the land judges have handled this matter before.
3 times.
And what are the what is the premise that?
And that also, I won't be lying to you. There seems to be a lot of confusion. Even the petitioners themselves, when you see the new, you are left there and you wonder, what is this? What kind of circus are we facing? You saw the new petitioners also, besides the famous, the ones we know, the Fox Odoy and Andrew Mwenda. We have newcomers also who have joined them. Our ambassador, our former ambassador in South Africa, Kintu Nyago, is there, and he has not been in all his phrase. So they are newcomers, and then we wonder why. But at the end of the day, so I think the Constitutional Court will ask the both petitioners to harmonize.
Yes,
we'll have one petition.
They will
merge.
They will merge.
Yes, they will merge.
So what do we expect different in terms of interpretation this time around, away from the precedent that was already set by the previous ruling?
Well, I can't read into the minds of the judges, but I think they will have to look and question why previously what they had ruled is not being taken as serious, and maybe we'll have to come out with, they will be restrained to come up with an order really to respect decisions of the court and not to bring these matters again before them. That is my view.
Let's assume, and this is for purposes of debate, that the Constitutional Court rules that the law is null and void, or does not play, or the Constitution doesn't support whatever has been enacted. And then we are taken back to where we were 2 months ago. How do we begin to move forward again?
Well, if we are a country that respects the rule of law, we will have to follow what...
We have to follow our Constitution.
Follow the Constitution.
Yes, the Constitution is the supreme law of the land. Every person or every authority must conform to the provisions of the Constitution.
Out there, won't that be effectively putting this whole debate into another political cycle gone?
No, the question that will arise then, but of course we are just we are speculating. We should wait for the courts to have their say. The Constitutional Court will guide the country on whether the law is in conformity with the Constitution or not. In case it is not, then it will be evidence that maybe this law was never necessary in the first place. All
right, interesting there. The issue is before court. Not even near anywhere a legal mind. Allow me to ask for perspective here.
Please go
As
ahead.
a human rights activist, I'm sure you have engaged very widely on how this matter is approached across the world. In the United States, it would be wrong for us to assume that the Constitution there does not have provisions for people with... How is the issue of homosexuality and the legal aspects dealt with within the parameters of the U.S. Constitution? Because when we hear Washington talk at other countries, where they should be talking to these countries, people might assume that perhaps it is something that is not even debated or is not controversial within the confines of Congress and the other aspects of state legislations in the United States. Do you have an idea on that?
Yes, I think there are also, the society in the American system is also divided. It's polarized. We have right-wing Christians who really are also against homosexuality.
That's right.
So in both houses, the Congress and the Senate, we have also those who are totally against the right-wing Christian movement. The Republicans really think that homosexuality really should not be tolerated. And then we have also liberals and the Democrats. So they decided, the society there is so divided. There are those for and there are those against. And there are those who think that it's just like the aspect of abortion in the United States. So you have a group that is a right-wing that really say, conservatives who say, no, 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 the right to life begins at conception. And they believe that no one should be allowed to undertake an abortion. And that's why you have different states coming up with different pieces of legislation. Some for and others against. And it's the same matter with homosexuality. So it's a really divided society. Just like here, you see that we have people who think that this is really anti-African, immoral. But the question one would ask, we who work on broad spectrum of human rights, is this the real issue that should be giving us sleepless nights in terms of our development challenges and governance problems?
It depends. I'll be asking why it shouldn't give you sleepless nights. Sure. But first, Joe Biden, Barack Obama, and any other president have spoken about this and have been very prompt in issuing statements when the whole issue of anti-homosexuality bills and legislation comes up in Uganda. Have you heard them talk to those who are anti-homosexuality in the United States and decree or give them alternative to take? Have you heard the President of the United States stance on homosexuality in the United States?
I don't think there are any efforts to discriminate against people based on their sexual orientation in the United States. I don't think there is any. It's the public view that is divided. And when I was last there, recently, I was told that it's almost 50-50. But there is nobody legislating to, to criminalize the conduct of any person. I think that's what makes a difference.
Okay. The issue is about criminalization.
Yes, you don't agree with me, but so should I die? For example, issues of a death penalty. Should I die just because you don't like the way I'm dressed or the way I talk?
And the nature of the law, how broad it is. Because right now, do you know my orientation?
I don't know.
Do I know your orientation?
I'm straight.
Because you have said.
Because you've
but,
said it.
But how would he find out?
So in the view that right now maybe I'm gay, as far as this piece of legislation is concerned, and you don't know, it makes it an offense for you to host me and be talking to me. It will be like you're contributing to the promotion.
You are promoting. So how will you know?
So if someone alleges...
So right now, if the law, without the petition,
yes,
I'm liable to go to jail.
Yes. Because you are hosting a gay person.
Does your employer know your sexual orientation?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to end the show.
So some of these things are... And then we also shouldn't bury our heads in our sand.
Yeah.
We have this community here, whether you like it or not. There are those who have been bold enough to come out and say, look,
that is right.
I am. This is how I am. And there are those who are in the closet, who are afraid of society, of the laws, of the system. So how do you deal with this?
In other words, the debate is not about the fact that people are or are not. When you look at the African context, I've always told some people that when you hear those who are pro or anti, you begin to assume that this is something that has never happened in Africa, but history teaches us, and that those who have read it well know that there have been episodes in African communities where homosexuality was apparently practiced, whether it was for punitive purposes or to tell whoever was being...
They had ways of dealing with it.
Yeah, dealing with it is quite different. But allow me ask, what is a fundamental question right now? The legal issues can stand. How do we deal with what is no doubt an existential social problem moving forward?
So there have been, prior to this, there have been serious allegations of an element of child recruitment. Yeah. Yes. Especially in schools, isn't it?
That is right.
So when you hear those stories of child recruitment, lots of money coming in, it presupposes we have no functional systems. So what is the role of a head teacher in a school? What is the role of prefects in a school? What's the head of those in charge of dormitories? If you can allow such an act to take place, and then you attribute it to money. Even a child who goes to school in boarding, I have children in boarding schools. At the day of reporting, besides the checklist which they ask you to bring, you asked how much money is your child coming with, and how much money is he or she depositing with the bursar's office. So where does this money penetrate? Who allows it to come? We have institutions like the Financial Intelligence Authority. We have banks that are supposed to report any suspicious transactions when you see money coming on someone's account. So this lot of money, alleged lots of money that is coming in, why aren't you intercepting it at the source? And two, if it was a serious problem in schools, as they say, why isn't it that this bill was brought by the Minister of Education and Sports as the in charge of schools? Or why isn't the Minister of the Presidency in charge of ethics? You say this is a moral issue, it's against the... Why aren't they the ones who come to... Where is the data? That in either St. Mary's College, Kisubi, or King's College, Buru, this is a serious problem. Out of 500 students in dormitory A, B, C, D, we have 100 students who have found this with so much money. Can you give me the data? What we call evidence-based data. Where is this data to show me? This is a serious problem that we are joking about.
Sarah Bireete.
No, I think that if you look at really how this bill was enacted, the first people I think to go on the streets were the Muslims to demonstrate. And of course, usually we don't have a right or freedom to demonstrate, or maybe the right does not exist for those who oppose government. So we saw the Muslim clerics demonstrating, and it's no wonder that the private member is also a Muslim. They were the first to get on the streets. Then we saw, of course, concerns raised by the clergy, the other religious leaders as well. And rightly so, because their mandate is to, you know, to preside over the morals, the moral fiber of society. But how do you entrench morals in society? How do you entrench social values in society? Social values can only be entrenched with social protection on the side of government. So if you say money is coming in and you are fighting money, you should fight that money with social protection for the people to reduce vulnerability, so that people are not vulnerable to the extent of being told what to do because of money. If you are the clergy and your duty is morals, to what extent have you done that? The law cannot do that for you. This, by the way, 80% of the provisions of this law already exist. So have they cured the problem? We should have known that we need a different approach as a country, if that was the concern.
I was interfacing with a gentleman who looks at these matters from a layman's point of view. And he asked me the question, World Bank and Washington, what is in this homosexuality thing that they are willing to subjugate a people from aid and help that they've been advancing on account of legislation that can actually be altered at one point in time? What is in it for the Western world in the homosexuality bracket? What is there for them?
This is my take. So what you perceive as the Western world or governments have taxpayers. The money they give to different countries, developing countries, is taxpayers' money.
Including
those
World
donations
Bank.
and grants,
Including the World
Bank.
Bank. So the citizenry there who belong perhaps to the LGBT are huge taxpayers. And for them to be told that in this country X, where they are contributing to development aid, is a country where people of this orientation are not related, it becomes a serious problem. Unlike our young democracies, there, the governments there, the politics there is based on interests. Lobbyism.
Yeah.
They have lots of money, and they will ask their lead, the congressmen, their representatives, why should you pass any support to such countries? And they have to listen.
Sarah Bireete, why is the homosexuality or pro-homosexuality lobby so powerful? What makes it powerful? To the extent that they can tell Washington, they can tell London that, hey, we are not agreeable to developments in this particular part of the world, and we think this should not be the case. To the extent that a nation as powerful and as rich as the United States can be cajoled to what they want.
I want to look at the flip side of your question. The president, the speaker, and so many other people have said that we are a sovereign country.
That's right.
And we are entitled to a right to self-determine how we want to be governed, which is very true. So for me, every nation should live by its standards.
That's right.
If the standards in the US are that you cannot criminalize people because of their sex orientation, they should operate by their standards as the US. If the standard in Uganda is that you do not tell us how to live our lives, then live your life. But also, don't think that the other person operating by their standards is wrong. Even you, for example, I would like to see our parliament using the same energy and numbers to sit down and revise the budget, revise our financial priorities. Now that it has been, it has come to light that the certificate of financial implications was given in error. The reason why the Constitution mandates that Minister of Finance issues a certificate of financial implications before any law is enacted is not just to look at the top value of the law. The Minister of Finance looked at implementation of the law. Say, no, we have the police, we have what? We will not need to spend money. So the law should go ahead. They forget to analyze the real economic impact of the law based on our partners' values. And that's the job they missed. And I've seen it in one of the petitions where they are, blaming the Minister of Finance for misleading the legislators as far as the financial implications of this law are concerned. So let's revise the budget and reallocate our priorities based on the so-called sovereignty and values that we are now telling everyone. Why don't we fund our values?
Mr. Kirenga.
Yes, please.
Why doesn't the United States, London, Washington, the European Union write statements like these ones when the people of Karamoja are seen to be suffering from hunger?
True.
When communities that require basic services are perennially subjugated to lack of these services, and then in the same stead that Sarah Bireete asks members of parliament to exercise energy in debating the budget, why doesn't Washington show us the same zeal and prompt statement rollout when the people of Karamoja are dying of hunger, when Ugandans die, when Africans are subjected to a lot more death in big numbers than homosexuality will ever?
That's a very good question and valid. And I agree with you. Why shouldn't they also put that? So it shows you interest. And that's why I told you about the lobby group.
In other words, I'm on the morning show trying to debate something that has interest to it, and perhaps what I'm trying to debate is null and void too.
That's true. So you see it, and those are the what I was talking about, the interest. That the American lobby group is not concerned about the impoverished Karamojong.
I mean, but also maybe
the sheer numbers of Africans
maybe it says something
as a result of human rights violations.
If you look at donor funding in Karamoja, it could be half of what money we put there as a country. There's a lot of donor support and funding in Karamoja. I think the question should be, including World Bank projects, World Bank, EU projects, disarmament, all that was heavily donor supported. So it's not that they are not interested in that. But the challenge of Karamoja is largely bad governance. And you know what is happening?
I brought in the Karamoja
as an example,
question as a single example of a litany of issues that should be able to let Washington be not only even issue statements, but be literally angry and tell Uganda this is not happening the way it's supposed to be happening for a people to live a dignified life. So on that account, we are halting this pay. And then all of a sudden, anti-homosexuality bill comes in, and within no time, the World Bank is slashing. I can see figures here that they make my eyes go teary. $790 million. This is huge money.
That's true. But on such an issue, I would also want to put it to you that the government itself would argue that now you're interfering with our sovereignty on determining what is our needs and priorities. You get it? And that's where the contradiction is. You recall that in Qatar, the LGBTI community wanted to exercise their rights when Qatar was hosting the World Cup.
Yes.
What was the position of the Emirate? They refused.
Yeah.
But you know why they were capable of saying so? It's because they are self-financing.
They're self-financing.
Yeah,
They have
they
money.
don't right. They have money. So you put your house in order maybe here.
Let's put our house in order.
And perhaps you'll be able to say enough is enough and therefore leave that development. But still that doesn't qualify you to discriminate against these people. Especially when you know that they are here.
Have we got an opinion? And I'm sure the president in the very last episode of this political roller coaster did get the opinion of medics. We know it, and I'm sure he's again going to get the opinion of medics on this particular issue. But as a society, and this one, I think we should approach it from the point of, I don't know how to describe it. When you hear that homosexuality is not rampant, but prevalent, is the word to use. We must be very moderate in how we use these words. Prevalent within our society.
Sure.
Isn't there some kind of an ember of fire within people that must draw to the question, how do we address it? How do we move forward?
Sure.
You spoke about the fact that what are headmasters doing? What are prefects doing in schools? Perhaps there isn't a clear blueprint on how to deal with that. But away from schools, these students will find themselves in places of entertainment, in sports, where there is no mechanism whatsoever by the owners to say, this is what you do, this is who you talk to. How do we approach this issue?
Very good question. So you see, and this is what I was saying, this piece of legislation was not really given enough time in terms of participation. But you recall that the debate as you started this program said has been there. This piece of legislation had been there and had been thrown out by the courts, either because of lack of quorum in Parliament. But the issue is, how come previously the community didn't come out outright to either support or to speak against this? It's because the element of also children. You see, they touched on an issue of children being recruited. And personally, I'm also against really this. If there's anything that I'm against, is someone trying to recruit a child into such acts. But the issue is that when you talk about children, everyone gets concerned. So when whoever is pushing this move to have this piece of legislation brought in the element of children being recruited, lots of money coming in, then everyone. And we are a society that does not read and analyze and ask what exactly, where is this coming from? And that's what I was asking. Please assist me with the numbers. I wanted the numbers.
Okay, talking about numbers and data, we are going for a short break, but when we return, we shall throw this to Sarah Bireete to help us within the civil society and the workings of the donor world. Why aren't donors providing us with some data that might be very important in understanding the numbers of the community of LGBT in the country? Because I'm sure they have the resources and the ability to get these numbers.
Should it be the international community or should it be us? If you say, before we break off, you are saying this thing is an African.
No, I'm not saying it's
okay, I'm saying that's the rhetoric.
Okay, yeah,
that is the rhetoric.
Yeah.
This thing is an African, is foreign. But our history, including in our libraries, documents existing of this practice, including the times of Kabaka Mwanga.
And it has never been eradicated.
Yes.
There's no evidence.
Two, we have words in our local language. I have a word in my local language. There is a word in Uganda. Bisiaga, Bitingwa. Who created these words?
When we return, we shall be delving a little bit deeper into the history of homosexuality in African societies. I don't have the basics on that, but we shall attempt to find out exactly where and how it was viewed. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Hoping that you are also in very fine shape to continue the debate. There are so many things that need to be considered when you are debating homosexuality and anti-homosexuality legislation, that you must be able not only to seek for the truth, but most importantly, understand it. Before we went for the break, I was engaging Sarah Bireete on data, and I was told effectively that it's not the international community to provide us with data on how many people are within the community of the LGBT community. That's what it's referred to. But again, I would like us to debate it. Why is it very difficult for all sides to zero on numbers? Me, I would expect, for example, if you're making a case for the gay lobby from outside Uganda, come with numbers too, some data.
No, let me say this. We have had a few minority really groups, including sex minorities Uganda. We have had, really, we have open LGBTIQ activists in this country.
That's right.
We have, in the petition, there are 3 people in the 2 petitions who are saying I'm openly gay in the petitions before court. So if you say people do not exist, I think we have spaces where...
I didn't say they don't.
No, I'm talking at a national, national level. Whether there were 2 or 3 people, then they have a right to life. They have a right to life.
That's right.
While growing up, I saw one person who was referred to as a chitingwa in my community, a male. And that is the male description of an open...
Chitingwa is tomboy?
No, like a gay person. Yes. I saw them way in the village before I came to Kampala, because I'm a village girl. So, yes, and I didn't know anything about homosexuality or anything, but I've seen the person. So when you go to every society, these people exist.
I think the Uganda
a quick search here shows that in Rango, Mudoko Dako was a reference for the Rangi gay people, way in history, before even the colonialists came. So when we say, whether they are 0.1%, whether they are 1%, these people have been with us way before anybody interacted with us. So how do we treat them? So how do we treat them is the question.
That's right.
And that's why people are saying that there are discrimination issues here.
In making a case for discrimination against, in other words, not to entrench discrimination against LGBT community, has there been any concerted effort, targeted research to come out with history? Because me, if I were a protagonist of a certain interest, I would come up with a whole body of knowledge to support my case. I would expect scholars, including Professor Sylvia Tamale, to avail this nation with not only activist information, but research.
She has written.
So that I'm not simply reading.
Yes, she has authored.
Wow.
She has authored.
I need to be able to.
Yes.
So that the nation, in, for example, consultation or process of debating this, you do not go at what you see as an attack on the community, but a lack of information by those that are appearing to be attacking the community. Why aren't professors like making sure that this information that they have researched and gathered is readily available to make a case? Because knowledge is important.
Chris, that's very true, and you raise a very valid point. The knowledge is there. The issue is, are people willing to receive this knowledge?
It's not even about willingness to receive the knowledge. Throw it at us.
Oh, it's there.
It's there.
It's there, Chris.
Launch the book and tell us, here is a book.
What we should be tasking the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, as they are going to do their census in 2023, they should have a question. Fine, and then you get figures.
Okay, but are people free?
That's also another thing.
Yes, the stigma, now we have a lot discriminating against them. The one is about HIV and access to health care. Yes, will they come out or they are now in hiding?
All right, I'm glad you bring up the issue of the implications, especially when it comes to funding. Let me leave the aspect of history and the data. I'm sure we shall be settling that at a certain point in time. Sure. When you look at the figures in terms of aid, if by any chance this law holds a sway and that money is held and not given to Uganda, what are the implications? Economic ones. Bireete.
I think I've seen only the calculation by the PEPFAR funds and under the US, the $1 billion. I have not tabulated the rest of the figures. But for me, my view is if the Constitutional Court upholds the law, then Uganda should behave as a sovereign country and pick its bills. Even before the Constitutional Court pronounces itself, because it will take a while. We are in a budgeting phase.
That's right.
The partners who have indicated their concerns about the law, that's why I'm saying the Speaker should now reconvene Parliament to revise the budget that they've passed based on the partners that have expressed discomfort with the law and reallocate that money. Because we are not going to disadvantage our people. I've seen the President says, America wants my citizens to die. Whose primary duty is it to treat your citizens? It is the duty of Uganda and the President. So whether America wants them to die or not, what are you doing as the President? Can you tell the country that I have now found money, I have $1 billion, if America is uncomfortable with us, I will provide the ARVs. That is what a leader should be doing at this material point.
Take it on.
I agree with them, because you see, in part of the 53 trillion budget or 52 trillion, there is a component where they expect partners, development partners, and also including borrowing. How are they going to address that gap right now in case these development partners put into effect the threats they're saying? They're stating that they're not likely to. It's going to affect their funding to the budget of this country. So these are questions that they really need to be addressing. And I don't know whether they have a ready fix for this, knowing that we've just come out of the COVID pandemic and we're trying to pick up so that they stimulate growth in the economy. I really don't know whether they're really prepared for this.
But that's where the financial implications should have come in before. That's why the Constitution says establish the financial implications of any law. So did we do our homework or not?
They looked at it from a narrow perspective. Do we have the institutions to host this piece of legislation? But they didn't look at the wider implications in terms of development aid and its effect in realizing their national development plans.
Legislators succumb to emotions, right?
That's what I think.
But the Constitution prohibits that. You don't legislate.
All right.
Your emotions.
As we enter the final bend of this discussion, the political implications are enormous ahead of 2026. We saw in the previous episode it gained a lot of traction in terms of political capital for all political actors. As a journalist and one who has followed these events, sometimes I'm inclined to think this is designed to happen, and the petitions shall roll out. The American government will threaten, and then everything will come back to where we were 4 or 6 months ago, and then life will continue. But the fundamental question of the security and the life of this community will not be resolved.
Sure.
In other words, this legislation has triggered a new wave of stigma that might not be addressed or reversed, whether the law makes it or not.
The damage has been done.
That is something that we should also deal with as a nation. You will tackle that question and how best it can be addressed, the politics of the day ahead of 2026. You are a human rights activist at the Center for Constitutional Governance, but I also love to call you a political commentator.
Well, previously we have seen attempts in this country by the regime to, throw words at especially leaders of the opposition during campaigns.
That's right.
It even reached a level where Kizza Besigye was charged with the trumped-up rape charges just to disadvantage him in campaigns, with the stage-managed witnesses, people coached in courts on EDGIA, and all that effort by the state. against the opposition contender. In the last elections, previous two elections, there has been a rhetoric on saying, I think it started with the Right Honorable Mama Babas. He's promoting homosexuality. Then he had also to come up and say, I have a family, you doesn't. You know, it got ugly to that level. Then in the last elections, it was against Bob Wine. Bob Wine is promoting homosexuality. So if this law is sustained in our law books, there is a very high likelihood that it will be used to blackmail opposition, to blackmail human rights activists, to just make sure the people take away your legitimacy by branding you a promoter or a homosexualist, like they were branding Honorable Fox Odoi, and then of course in prison and arrest you, and with the draconian sentences, as we can see. So political activists and human rights defenders are likely to fall victim of this law.
Interesting. I hope the powers that be can attend to that particular dimension. The fate of the community, you like it or not, anything triggered means that you've set the fire and you might not actually be able to put out the fire.
Sure.
Stigma is inherently anti-gay.
You put it right, Chris, and I really feel for them because they are human beings. And I don't know how my being gay or lesbian affects your livelihood as Chris. How does it affect your livelihood?
I can flip that question and say, if so and so was a thief or a murderer, how does his being a thief
I think you cannot compare that two.
It affects you because he's going to take over your right to property.
You cannot compare the two.
You can't compare the two.
You can't.
Yes.
No.
And this is about privacy. What two consenting adults decide to do in their privacy is none of my business or your business. But besides that, we acknowledge that these people are here. What would you want to tell a parent who has a child who belongs to this community? Do you expect, in your reasonableness, a parent to hand over this child to the police and say, my child is this and this, please go and protect? My child is this and please go and kill him. Yeah. What do you want us to do with this? You pretenders who say you are Christians. What do you want us to do for these people who are here, who have nothing to do with your personal life? What do you want us to do with them? Why should you pretend that you are a Christian country, a God-loving country, and you see people there? And what do you want to kill them? What do you want to do? They have a right to life. So, what we are not saying we want to promote LGBTism or that we should allow people to recruit them. No, no, no. That's another matter. We have people who are in the closet. And indeed, as you put it, whether the law is there or not there, the damage has been done. Because you hear some of them telling you, look, my landlord has asked me to leave and is not going to refund me my money. We who could talk to these people, you feel for them because they are human beings like us. And two, we saw this in COVID times. Young people who were chased from their homes because of their orientation. Where do you want us to put these people? What is the solution?
You've asked a fundamental question. Where do you want us to put these people? And it has completely flipped my mind to a set of questions regarding services. If you say hospitals,
sure,
schools, the curriculum must be attendant to the fact that the community is also part of those who deserve education. Now that calls for a rethink on that aspect, on how they are integrated into the education system. Receipt of services from health centers.
What do you mean reintegrated? Are they out of the education system?
There are some who feel like they are not. They don't want to go to the schools.
No, I think the policy in most of our schools.
Yeah.
First of all, children are not supposed to engage in sexual conduct. People of 18 years and above are mainly in higher institutions of learning. There are fewer A-levels who are that age. So the school policy, even though our laws really consent, the age of consent in our constitution is 18. So if there is any institution where people are below 18, They don't have to deal with these questions.
No, the reason I say that is because we already have efforts to tell young persons who are below 18 not to engage in sex between a female and a male as part of character. As part of character.
But also the Constitution, they don't have ability to consent.
They don't have ability to consent, but we must design information and instruction to that effect.
And nobody's against that.
Now, if you're designing instruction and information to the effect that a child must know that it is not okay to engage in sex before you are 18, and then there is this child who could be gay and their understanding of sex is with a person of the same, well, sex. Doesn't that pose a totally different question for the education system?
I beg to differ, Chris. Sex of all manner is prohibited for children in this country.
That is a fact.
Yes. So, if you, whether you're gay or not, you've not attained the age.
Haven't we encountered?
So the message then in schools should be, and they don't have to bother with orientation. Orientation is just a detail.
And also, Chris, should that be the school's matter?
You are prohibited.
I thought that's the work of the family, the basic unit of society.
It's an emerging reality where people have spoken about sexuality education. If you have children who have shown signs that they are of a particular orientation, shouldn't they be instructed and informed about that? Isn't that the challenge that, don't you see the challenge? It is not that you're going to open their minds up, which inevitably you will, because they will want to understand, hey, you mean me, I'm different, you know?
My thinking is seems to be a little bit different from yours. I think that would be the role at the family level, the basic unit of society, that parents should be playing that role.
A parent is already struggling to tell a boy who is attracted to a girl that he shouldn't do this. How is he or she going to get the guts to tell a boy?
The task to raise up a child is a collective task. But it starts with the family.
Interesting there. So we must agree that we have with us an existential question.
That's true.
And every player at every point must revise the way they approach it with an open mind.
That's true.
In order to ensure that the outcome is one that does not actually cause harm.
True.
Sarah Bireete,
well,
you seem to have a last word.
I differ on the need to educate people, and especially children.
That's right.
But because our point is that these people have always existed. So what makes us then think that we need to change our education curriculum? They've always existed. So society was normal until, how have we been carrying on along? These people have always been with us. So there's no need to go into all that. All that people are saying is, one, the Constitution prohibits discrimination of any nature. The Constitution prohibits values, morals, customs that are contrary to the Constitution. So we already have a standard. Can we go by that? Yeah, and then we don't need to engage with all these questions that you're raising.
No. At the end of the day, so much comes up as a result of anything being amplified to the level that we find ourselves at right
so
now.
That so much has to be sieved.
Yeah, it has to be.
You sieve it and say what is relevant for the society, what's relevant for the country.
Because the reason you disagree
Sure.
with somebody's approach, including the MPs, is perhaps because they've not attended to the very small aspects of this discussion. And it keeps overlapping. And by the time you know it, for example, tomorrow, we could wake up and there's a new dynamic to this whole equation.
That's true.
The bill was enacted in 6 days.
All right.
Contrary to the rules of Parliament of 45 days.
Allow me end this debate on the dynamics of the anti-homosexuality legislation. I'm glad that you've opened our minds to the issues that ought to be given attention, especially with regard to the fact that some things are simply a reality that we must find ways to deal with and not to seek ways that are or could be inhuman. That will do it for our Kickstarter discussion. Sarah Bireete, Executive Director at the Center for Constitutional Governance, and human rights activist Robert Kirenga. Many thanks. I'm Chris Higenyi. On behalf of my colleague, Priscilla, Regina, Naluga, and the team behind the scenes that ensures this is a smooth ride. Yesterday, I was told to mention some names. So today, I'll be mentioning one. Thanks, Daddy Cool, for the job that you do behind the cameras. We'll see you tomorrow, Friday, for yet another discussion that will be aligned to the arts industry and everything that is going on in there. I'll do it. That's it rather for now. Have yourselves a good day. I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.